Welcome to Crash Course U.S. History. The United States is always in conflict. In World War I, the U.S. was almost forced into this conflict. The war drew in all the world's economic great powers, which were assembled in two opposing alliances. The Allies, based on the triple of the United Kingdoms, France, and the Russian Empire, and the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary. Although Italy had been a member of the Triple Alliance along Germany and Austria-Hungary, it did not join the Central Powers as Austria-Hungary had taken offense against the terms of the alliance. These alliances were reorganized and explained as more national entered the war. Italy, Japan, and the United States joined the Allies, and the Ottoman Empire and Bulgarian Central Powers, ultimately more than 70 million military personnel, including 60 million Europeans, were mobilized on one of the largest wars in history. The eternal conflict over the Philippines, the communist insurgency, on the other hand, is propagated by the Communist Party of the Philippines military wing, the New People's Army, NPA. Most of the conflict in the South is in the remote islands of central Mandingo, especially on Bistitin and Julo. The Korean War. The U.S. felt like they had to stop communism, forcing them into more conflict. The Korean War provided the first frontation between nuclear powers, and as the war progressed, the conflict demonstrated how difficult it would be for either side to use atomic bombs diversely in battle. The Cold War. Right after World War II, the U.S. again entered a conflict, but this time it was with Russia. Growing out of post-World War II tensions between the two nations, the Cold War rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union that lasted for much of the second half of the 20th century resulted in elation suspects, heightened tensions, and a series of internal incidents that brought the world's superpowers to the brink of disaster.
Yeah.
Business influences government. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. He made so much money that political bosses had to listen to anything he said. In U.S. versus Standard Oil, the United States realized that Standard Oil had too much power and they had to split up his business. Andrew Carnegie's steel monopoly. His company was so powerful that politicians were all but forced to listen to him. Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall. The way he went about his business made him the most powerful man in the city of New York.
The Chinese Exclusion Act limited the number of Chinese immigrants, but didn't stop them from continuing to come into the U.S. Great Migration. African Americans moved to the northern parts of the U.S. to get better jobs and education. This also influenced the spread of different cultures. Barcero program allowed Mexican immigrants to move to the U.S. for work because we need more workers. The Bracero program, named for the Spanish term bracero, meaning manual labor, was a series of laws and diplomatic agreements initiated by an August 1942 exchange of diplomatic notes between the United States and Mexico for the importance of temporary 19th Amendment. Women fought for the right to vote because they didn't feel like they had as much political power as men. Passed by Congress June 4th, 1919, and ratified on August 18, 1920. The 19th Amendment guarantees all American women the right to vote. Achieving the milestone required a lengthy, difficult struggle. victory took decades of agitation and protest. Beginning in the mid 19th century, several generations of women suffrage supporters lectured, wrote, marched, lobbied, and practiced several disobedience to achieve what many Americans considered a radical change of the constitutional. Um, Few early supporters lived to see final victory in 1920. Flappers. Women cut their hair short and wore different clothing than norm because they wanted to feel independent. Flappers were a new breed of young Western women in the 1920s who wore short skirts, bobbed their hair, listened to jazz, and flaunted their disdain for what was then considered acceptable behavior. Flappers were seen as brash for wearing excessive makeup, drinking, treating sex in a casual manner, smoking, driving automobiles, and otherwise flaunting social and sexual norms. Flappers had their origins in the liberal period of the Roaring Twenties, the social political turbulence, and increased cultural exchange that followed the end of World War One, as well as the export of American jazz culture to Europe. Women after World War II. After World War II, women were such a helping during the war that men had a new form of respect. During the Second World War, women proved that they could do men's work and do it well, with men way to serve in the military and demands for war material increasing. Manufacturing jobs opening up to women and up their earning power, yet women's employment was only encouraged as long as the war was on. Once the war was over, federal and civilian policies replaced women workers with men.
African Americans have been segregated throughout history. Harlem Renaissance. African Americans in the United States had their own Renaissance where they expressed their culture like never before. The Harlem Renaissance was a name given to the cultural, social, and artistic explosion that took place in Harlem between World War I and the middle of the 1930s. During this period, Harlem had a cultural center, drawing black writers, artists, musicians, photographers, poets, and scholars. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, muckrakers that fought for equal rights no matter what color skin. Booker T. Washington, educator, reformer, and the most influential black leader of its time, 1856 through 1915, preached a philosophy of self-help. Racial solidarity and accommodation. He argued blacks to accept discrimination for the time being and concentrate on elevation themselves through hard work and material prosperity. W.E.B. Du Bois, a towering black intellectual, scholar, and political thinker, repression. Du Bois advocated political action and civil rights agenda. He helped found the NAACP. In addition, he argued that social change could be accomplished by developing the small group of college-educated black he called Talented 10. White Man's Burden, a poem saying African Americans were a burden for white people. The white man's burden is referred to as a relief of uncivilized, by providing them with food and curing sickness while bringing an end to slaughter. The purpose of the white man's burden was to allow the citizens of the United States to see imperialism as a duty and a favor to others, thus drumming up more support for the Spanish-American War.